and welcome. You're watching Head to Head with UATV. I'm Oles Gerjuk. For the first time, a Ukraine house had been opened at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The forum itself attracts the world's political and economic elite. This year, politicians, activists, and business executives discussed blockchain technology, agriculture, artificial intelligence, and investment, to name a few. That is why it was a great opportunity for Ukraine to promote itself as a prospective partner. How did the Ukraine House fulfill this task, and what important achievements were made within the sideline talks of the Ukrainian president with high-ranking politicians? To answer these questions, we are joined in the studio by Olha Belkova, a deputy in the Ukrainian parliament. Hello, and thank you for coming.
Hello, Oles.
Ms. Belkova, in your opinion, what are the achievements of the World Economic Forum for Ukraine this year?
Well, let me start by saying that I've been visiting Davos for the annual meeting of World Economic Forum for many, many years, usually as a guest of private events. And a few times I was there as a part of Ukrainian delegation with a formal access to World Economic Forum. And it has been my dream to see Ukrainian house, along with other houses, represented nations and countries in Davos. Finally, this year, we had this wonderful initiative. Let me tell you that that was a private initiative, which is even more difficult to achieve, because it's not so easy to combine a consortium of different investors who appreciates this idea and who is eager to put not only resources, but a lot of time for preparation of presenting our country. So I congratulate those who did it, and I think this is one of the biggest achievements of this year, because the country was well represented.
Could you explain our audience what means the Ukraine House? So this is some kind of the platform of discussions about Ukraine and about the possibilities to invest in Ukraine. Am I right? Or is it a broader issue?
Close enough. I'd say in Davos, at the occasion of World Economic Forum, each country decides what to present. And there are many different formats. Some decide to throw wonderful parties with lots of food and drinks. And this is one of the possibilities. I'm very grateful to organizers of Ukrainian House that they projected image of very cool, innovative, progressive country. We had a small premise, but it was always full, packed with visitors, because we had stream of different events, which were included into like a special app, which was active during Davos, and everybody who was interested in digitalization, cryptocurrencies, agriculture, energy, they had an opportunity to engage with Ukraine through discussions of world trends and what is happening in Ukraine.
Who was taking part from the Ukrainian side? Were there some startup companies or some companies that would like to develop to develop themselves to the world market, or who was attending this conference?
The whole Ukrainian delegation, as always, was composed of politicians who, I'm also part of this group. This year, also a little bit different from the years before, a lot of younger generation politicians came, so-called Euro-optimists, and, those who joined parliament for the first time this year. Few ministers, Ivanka Klimpush-Tensadze was there, Minister of Euro-Atlantic Integration, Minister Amelyan was there, Minister Daniluk was there, President with his group of people, business, representatives from Ukraine, especially those with, let's say, Euro-Atlantic aspirations for business. We had representatives of NGOs. We had a younger generation of students being volunteers of Ukrainian House. I'd like also to mention that there are two major events in Davos related to Ukraine. Besides official discussions at the World Economic Forum, there is also Ukrainian breakfast. It used to be lunch years before, but now it's breakfast. It was attended by 300 plus people, and we had President Poroshenko speaking there. We also had Chrystia Freeland, who is now Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada and a great friend of Ukrainian woman, very strong woman from Ukrainian regions. And we had Mr. Lipton, who was speaking on behalf of IMF. So the whole discussion there was around what is happening in Ukraine. How do we progress with reforms? What are the promises? What are the hopes for 2018?
What are the major statements and what are the major results of these discussions?
So let's say at the Ukrainian breakfast, I think most of the guests agreed that the West has high expectations in terms of our anti-corruption fight. This is still the main expectation we have to deliver. We were praised for some of the reforms which have first achievements, but we were also reminded that in most of the countries, reforms take a lot of time. And it would be too much to expect Ukraine to deliver just since 2014 final results of, let's say, energy reform, which I work on. But still, Mr. Lipton and Chrystia Freeland both were mentioning reform of Naftogaz, reform of gas market as an achievement. But once again, everybody expects us to see our activization, acceleration of our initiatives for anti-corruption court, for some particular cases which are now under consideration, both by General Prosecutor Office or NABU. The world is concerned. At the same time, we had a very promising set of statements saying that nobody is tired of Ukraine. Everybody is watching us progressing. It's just like Ukrainian people, we want more progress. That was a message from the West, I'd say.
Speaking of the IMF, the Ukrainian president had a meeting with Christine Lagarde, managing director of the IMF, and they came to the conclusion that IMF will keep its cooperation with Ukraine. My following question is, what about the IMF, together with the World Bank, being dissatisfied about the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Court bill earlier? What about their statements about this? And does this mean that the IMF keep insisting on their requirements toward the Anti-Corruption Court bill, or it doesn't?
I think it is important for everybody to understand that IMF is a very well-structured organization where once they sign specific agreement with the government, and let me remind you that the agreement is being signed with the government, not with the parliament, not with the president, but all of us, we are stakeholders of the process. Once they sign something and once they acknowledge some prior actions or other indicating points of our reforms, they very seldom change their opinion. But then reality is such that for each and every idea, the devil is in the details. So nobody is saying right now that the anti-corruption court should not be happening. The problem is to define in which form, with which particular stakeholders being engaged, and at which level. So I think right now we should expect professional discussion within the parliament, along with so-called like an anti-corruption alliance of NGOs and experts, summarizing the best lessons learned from other countries, and we need to speed up the process to kind of fulfill this obligation. I think we need to move along with this requirement, and we need to fulfill this obligation.
Well, it was just that the IMF was not very happy about the draft anti-corruption court bill, as far as I know, and they were recommending Ukrainian government to go along with the recommendations of the Venice Commission. But now, since this the statement of Christine Lagarde is very promising, I think that they could meet some conclusion and find some solution in their discussion.
I'm sure solutions are out there. I read Venice Commission conclusions in the way they were written. I think I strongly advise everybody who is interested in this topic, to trust their own judgment and compare, the documents, all the documents existing. And I do hope that, the meeting between Madame Lagarde and Mr. Poroshenko would move us all forward towards this joint solution, which would satisfy not only IMF and President, but also people in Ukraine, which is even more important, because this reform is not done for IMF. This reform is done because all of us, we want justice, and we want to see evidence that anti-corruption court is actually a very useful tool for our system of justice.
For sure. Just the IMF is just helping us to push it through.
Yes.
You stated that you read the recommendations of the Venice Commission. How would you evaluate them?
Well, as always...
How useful are they, meaning the Ukrainian reality?
Well, I think the whole idea of anti-corruption court is an innovation. If you look at the different legal systems around the world, let's say not every country has such an innovative tool. And that's why we have to deliberately, pick and choose details, what to accept and what to... of course, the Venice Commission has tremendous experience, and we need to include this experience in what we do. But we also have to combine the existing system here. So it's not such a, unusual baby which doesn't fit in the family. Of course, we all anticipate that, that this tool should be very different from what we have right now, because we are not satisfied with what is happening, let's say, in a regular system of courts. But this is a very fine balance, which I'm sure we will achieve, once we have more discussions amongst different politicians and experts in this field.
Well, another topic to talk about, Poroshenko met also the U.S. State Secretary Rex Tillerson during the World Economic Forum to discuss the details of already agreed provision of the defensive weapon to Ukraine, Javelin missiles. In your opinion, how could this influence the conflict in eastern Ukraine?
Well, I think it is very important to have such a meeting because U.S. Secretary of State is a very high-level position, in that particular system, and such a meeting is once again encouraging us in our partnership. Once such meetings are happening, we see more pragmatic results being delivered, including, the weapons you just mentioned. This is important, but it is also important to exchange through the private discussion, facts and figures about reforms progress. I do know that there were discussions about some of the issues in the sphere of energy. And then one day before or after, I heard a statement by Secretary Tillerson on Nord Stream 2, which is extremely important for our country.
He recognized that this is the threat for the European energy security, which is making United States an ally for Ukraine in this energy question.
Yeah, I'd say this is our strongest ally as of now, and I'm extremely grateful to President Poroshenko of raising this question, because I think it's one of the most important threats ahead of, for our economy ahead of us and our security as well.
Well, just speaking about this provision of the defensive weapons, finishing the topic, the Kremlin basically stated that they would answer with the bloodshed on this. Could you comment on that? So basically, it gives us a chance to resolve the conflict, but the Kremlin is kind of threatening Ukraine, maybe escalating the conflict.
Well, I'm not sure which kind of statement it was and who made it, but I'd say Dmitry Peskov. I'd say he is not. I don't want to to give a very strong judgment on this, but I think for a country which is still saying that they are brothers and they are taking care of those who are living here and speaking Russian, for instance, I think it's a very strange statement to be made by the state official, given that many people, who are living in the area of which is not controlled by Ukraine as of now, they actually do not want to see any war, any escalation. And the point is that Ukraine has all the rights to defend its borders with all the weapons, but only to defend. And never in our history we actually used any kind of weaponry to actually attack or escalate anything. So I'm extremely disappointed with such statements.
And especially keep it in mind that Russia doesn't recognize its presence in the east of Ukraine.
Yeah, but this is like always with Russia. They say one and they actually mean something else. And once again, we see that they have no desire to fulfill their obligations through the Minsk agreement. We may like or dislike the agreement, but this is an agreement which was formally stated and they are part of. And I would expect, them to fulfill at least some of their obligations. But this is not the case.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for right now. But thank you so much for this very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
That was Olha Belkova, the Ukrainian MP. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Oles Gerjuk. Goodbye.